Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, welcome to our guest webinar today. It is the third webinar in our guest webinar series with the designer CPA, and that is Peter Lang himself. He's an accountant who specializes in the unique accounting challenges faced by artistic professionals, such as interior designers like you. He has a bachelor's in accounting, a master's in taxation. He is a certified public accountant, and he is certified with DM as well, so he knows the software inside and out. Actually, the most important part, though, is that he's really easy to get along with. He can have a great conversation with you, and he's doing all these different webinars for us, and he actually is going to talk at the end about some classes that he's putting together, too. So we're interested to hear about that. And hopefully he's going to be joining us at our Designers Lounge at the Universal Showroom in High Point this fall too. So I will let Peter take it away, but feel free to chat or put questions into the question pane, and we will get to those a few times throughout the webinar as well. All right, there you go, Peter.
Hi, Lindsay. Okay, hi everyone. I hope everyone, can you hear me okay, Lindsay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Sound good.
All right, so like Lindsay said, I am Peter Lang. I'm going to be going over some stuff today, and you can see some of my contact information right here on the screen. I do encourage you to follow me on Instagram. I might be one of the only CPAs in the country that have an Instagram account, but I promise it isn't as boring as you think an accountant's Instagram would be. And you can find other information on my website, which is thedesignercpa.com. Okay, let's get started. So here is the agenda that we are going to talk about today. So some of the things that I added is what questions you should ask to make sure you choose the right bookkeeper for your business. That also would be if you currently have a bookkeeper and I think that if you're listening and you do have a bookkeeper, you might have one of two things. You either think, I have a rock star bookkeeper who I work with, I have no issues whatsoever. Or you might deep down in your gut be like, I'm not really sure if my bookkeeper truly understands my industry. I'm not really sure they truly understand how to use Design Manager, and I'm just wondering how to figure that out. So we're going to talk about both of those things. Very important other agenda pieces, how to determine if your bookkeeper and CPA will get along. So if you have a CPA or an enrolled agent, a tax preparer, someone like that, and the bookkeeper, we're going to talk about that because it's so important for everyone to be able to get along. And then finally, setting up a schedule and plan to continuously review specific reports with your bookkeeper. So if you're a business owner and you're listening to this, as a business owner, you need to pay attention to your financials as well. So those are three things that we're going to talk about here. And okay, great. So let's just start with, if you are in need, if you're at the point where you're in the need for a bookkeeper and you're wondering like, oh geez, I'm frustrated with the financial side. I don't want to come across as like I don't understand, but I also want to make sure that I'm picking someone who is the right candidate for my firm. Asking them how many interior design firms do you work with I would ask that as the first question. Now, is there a right and wrong answer to this? No. Is it nice when they say, oh, I work with X amount of interior design firms? Yes, because then you know that they understand the industry. And you also know that the accounting side of the interior design industry is complex compared to other industries. So is it wrong if they say, no, I don't work with interior design firms? No, but we'll talk about more of if the answer to no, if that question is no. If they say they work with interior design firms, asking them about which interior design softwares they have experience with. And the reason why I ask that is why I think you should ask that is because they might say, yes, I work with interior design firms and we only work with QuickBooks Desktop. So if that's the case, you know, that could be fine, but then again, if you are using Design Manager, we all know that QuickBooks doesn't have the robust functionality for the interior design business, and therefore there could be a long learning curve in the beginning when you start with the new Bookkeeper. Another great question would be, can you describe the process from a customer paying us for a proposal or a retainer to the completion of the project? And the reason why and you can ask that in a different way, it doesn't have to be that exact question, but that's an important one to see how much specific knowledge that bookkeeper has in the processes of the industry. Do they understand that a client, a cash receipt from a customer for a retainer needs to get put in that way? And if it's for a proposal, it needs to get put in for that specific proposal. And do they understand that when it's time to invoice that customer, do they understand how to do it in Design Manager so that that proposal payment or deposit is being hit to the appropriate invoice? And also, on the other side, do they understand when we have to make a vendor deposit or we have to pay a vendor bill with our money? Do they understand that whole project, the process of the project? And if I were you, I would just ask the question and just listen and just see, and you'll be able to tell how much knowledge that they actually have in the industry. So when I have hired accountants for my firm, I ask similar questions to these, whether it's the tax or the bookkeeping side. And if they do have experience, I just ask these questions just to see. And if they really do have quite a bit of experience, they'll be able to answer that third question with quite a bit of detail. Okay, so the next question that you should ask is, do you strictly reconcile bank and credit card statements for your customers, or do you assist with producing invoices and purchase orders, paying bills, and or making sure clients are paying us in a timely fashion? So bookkeepers, the flat amount of work that a bookkeeper will do is making sure that the bank statements and the credit card statements reconcile to the accounting software. Your idea of bookkeeping and someone else's idea of bookkeeping could be totally different. So having that initial conversation with someone before they start to work is so valuable, because that way there isn't any confusion. You will know right away whether or not the bookkeeper only reconciles accounts, or are they going to be willing to help you produce invoices and get those invoices out to customers, setting up purchase orders, making sure your bills are paid, maybe even checking in with customers on accounts receivable. If you have outstanding bills and your clients haven't paid you, are they going to help with you to do that? You know, there's no right or wrong answer for this one either. It's just a matter of communication and setting guidelines beforehand so that you know who's responsible to do what. Another question that you should ask is, how many times per month do you sit with a client and review your financial reports? Is the bookkeeper going to work remotely, or are they going to come into the office? If they're working remotely and then they just kind of send you an email that says, you know, everything's been reconciled, you know, that's fine, but having this communication up front and asking how many times you're going to review it, because I think it's very important that it happens at least once a month, if not more, that you're going over it with your bookkeeper so that you understand what's going on and you can make sure that everything that they're doing is being accurately done. Another question to ask before you get started is, do you bill by the hour or a flat monthly rate? How soon do you communicate with one of your customers if the bill is going to fluctuate in a given month? So if it's a flat monthly rate, they should be able to just tell you that. And that's good to know, because now you can budget and you can say, okay, I know exactly how much this bookkeeper is going to charge me. But most of the time, you could find that they're billing by the hour. And if that's the case, then Obviously, if you normally do 5 projects a month and all of a sudden you have 7, 8, or 9, or on the opposite side, you might only have 2, is that bill going to fluctuate and how often, and do they give you a heads up and say, hey, you know, it looks like I normally work a half a day a week. You got a lot going on here. In order to make sure that everything stays accurate every week, I'm going to have to put in a full day or a week and a half. Are they just going to do that work and then not tell you for 2 or 3 weeks, and then your bill is 3 times the size it's normally, and now you have a surprise in your budget and there was no communication? So one of the most important things in this whole process is communication. You're going to see that more and more as I go over these items. Okay. Now, what kind of questions can you ask to make sure your bookkeeper understands the interior design industry? Is your bookkeeper a design manager partner? If they're a partner, then you know that they've gone through a test and they stay certified with Design Manager, and then we're all on a email list. So any changes with Design Manager, we know right away, and it allows us to be able to be up to date with the program at all times. If they're not, that's okay. But how much experience do they have with working with Design Manager? Like I had said before, it's not a problem to hire a bookkeeper without experience in Design Manager if you have that good feeling about them. So you could interview someone and feel really good about everything, and you could have a good feeling after that interview. If they say they've never worked in Design Manager, I am not by any means saying don't hire them. I'm just saying that you need to anticipate that there might be a learning curve in the beginning, which will lead to potentially extra time on your part to train them and go over that and hold their hand, and more communication, which could lead to you not being able to do that project side stuff for a little while. But if you have a good feeling with them, that investment is probably worth it. Also, if they bill by the hour, your invoices in the beginning of the relationship might be higher. So if you decide to have a good feeling about someone, you choose a bookkeeper that does not know Design Manager, and all of a sudden you are getting these bills and they're astronomical, and you're thinking, man, I wish I couldn't afford a bookkeeper. I think it's kind of important, maybe especially if there's some training involved, to kind of go over that first and maybe even set like a max amount of time, or just make sure that the communication is there so that you're not, you don't get that surprise big bill. Where if you were looking at other websites or other bookkeeping websites and they have flat rates and you're thinking, why am I paying so much more? This could be why. Also, you can ask them to list other reports that you should be reviewing with them. So a bookkeeper who just reconciles the checking account and the credit card statement, they might email you a copy of the balance sheet and the profit and loss statement and say, everything's reconciled, and you're thinking, well, what does all of this mean? Do they go over? Will they sit down with you in your meetings, whether it's in person or virtual? And do they go over the open client deposit report? Do they go over that open vendor deposit or the sales tax report? Accounts receivable aging, accounts payable aging. These are all great reports that you can find in Design Manager that back up the overview reports. They show more detail. I always say that if you can possibly sit weekly and review these reports and make sure they're accurate, it's great. If your bookkeeper is working virtually, they might not know how this project that you're working on is going along. Is it getting delayed? Is it wrapping up quicker? These are the kind of things when you're communicating with someone that they'll know. So if it looks like a lot of invoices are outstanding, or deposits, open deposits are dragging on and on, why is this there for this long? If you communicate and say, you know what, they picked the wrong item, now we got to reorder a new item and it's going to get delayed for 12 weeks. Okay, that makes sense. So more communication, more clarity. So just asking that and seeing if they review those details, that can be certainly of good value. Okay, so how do you determine if your bookkeeper and CPA will get along? And you can cross that out and say enrolled agent or tax preparer. Very important that that everyone on the team gets along. It is imperative that you, your bookkeeper, and your CPA all have an open line of communication. So I said it, you, your bookkeeper, and your CPA, not your bookkeeper and your CPA, you, your bookkeeper, and your CPA, because as a business owner, if you're listening to this, it's important that you have a say and you're reviewing this information, because you got into business to make money, and it's important for you to understand. So everyone, the more communication that everyone has, the better. If you are looking for a new bookkeeper, ask them how often they communicate with their current client CPA. So some of them might say never. I have to wait for the journal entries. They might call it the journal entries, which are tax adjustments that happen after the tax return. I get that from the client, the CPA's office once a year, but I never talk to the CPA. If they say never, ask them if they're willing to set up periodic meetings with your entire team. Listen to the response. If they're not willing, you need to determine why. And I say this because I have a lot of great bookkeepers that I work with as a CPA, and I think it's really important that everyone communicates throughout the year. In fact, I just got off a video call this morning where we had the bookkeeper, we had a business coach, we had the client, and we had the CPA all on the same call. And that way, we're all making decisions for the customer at the same time. We all understand everything. If they say never, sometimes, I guess what I'm trying to say is that sometimes there can be a negative feeling between the two people. I'm not saying that that happens a lot of the time. It probably happens a small amount of time. But when that happens, it can say, well, I don't want the CPA telling me what to do because I'm a bookkeeper and I understand the accountant and they're not even in here, and, you know, or the CPA can say, well, what does a bookkeeper know? I have the degree, I have the license, I know everything. You don't want that. If you're getting a negative response towards the CPA when you're asking the question, or if you're asking the CPA and you're getting a negative towards a bookkeeper, that we don't need negative, we need positive. We need people that are willing to communicate. And so anyway, that is a good question to ask so that you get a good answer, and hopefully that person that you have either chosen to hire or you would like to hire in the future will give you a good answer, and everyone will be able to communicate. Okay. This is a good one. I just kind of said this, but on the flip side, is your CPA willing to periodically meet with you and your bookkeeper? So that's important as well. You don't want to just have a CPA who they send the reports from design manager to the office once a year, and then there's all these questions, and at the last minute, right before the tax deadline, and we're doing all this stuff that we don't need to at the end, and you're not getting proper planning. If they're unwilling, you need to press for a good answer as to why. I think you're entitled to that answer. You're paying that person. They should be willing to at least meet once or twice a year with the whole team, so that on the tax side, they can give answers to the questions the bookkeeper or you as the business owner have. So I recommend a very minimum, at least 2 meetings between a CPA, a bookkeeper, and the owner. That's nice. I don't know if my fellow CPAs that are more traditional, that have a tax preparer, compliance business, and maybe some of them only really work the bulk of their work during tax season. I don't know if they would agree with me, but I think that it provides everyone more value if that happens at least twice a year. And tax and accounting planning simply cannot be accurate without this necessary communication. I used to work at a smaller firm years ago, and I worked for a gentleman who would contact the clients at the end of summer, like right around this time of year, to try to get everyone for a meeting by the end of the year so that there was no surprises and whatever. And there would be times where the business owner or the bookkeeper would be so busy they would not be willing to meet, or they wouldn't have a chance. We would never hear from them. The holidays would come and go, and then it came time to do the tax return, and then there was this big tax surprise, and that's a bummer, and it doesn't need to happen. So I can't stress enough, you're going to get the most value for the money you're spending for these people in your team if everyone is willing to communicate at least a couple of times a year. Okay, now I brought this in because I had used this in a previous webinar in the beginning of the year. I did it because I asked what the best questions to ask your current or potential new CPAs. And I brought it in because when I was reviewing it, when I was building this webinar and I was reviewing what I did earlier in the year, I was looking at these slides, and then it occurred to me that if you look at these questions, they're the same as what I'm saying about your bookkeeper. And I think it's important, I'm not going to read them all again, but I think it's important to see that these questions are the same because these things are very, very important to have. And there's quite a bit of bookkeepers and CPAs out there who don't really truly understand the interior design business. So finding someone who does is so important. Okay, here's a couple of other ones, extra tips. This has nothing to do with the bookkeeper. This has to do with a CPA. Here's a good question to ask your CPA right now. I'll give you some extra advice here. If you haven't heard from your CPA since the last time they filed a tax return, you could call and ask for a meeting and ask questions like, do you think the accrual or cash method of accounting is best for my business as far as a tax return is concerned? Design Manager operates in the accrual method of accounting, but you can pick either or for your tax return. So that's a good question to ask your CPA right now. Can someone in your staff handle logging into cloud-based accounting software and accessing necessary reports? The reason why I asked that is because I, as an accounting firm, anytime I get a new client who uses Design Manager, they're able to fill out a form, and I'm able to log in basically to my own Design Manager account. Or I have seen where clients will give their login information to their CPA firm so that they can log into Design Manager too. And the reason why you want that to happen is because it will give the CPA firm an opportunity to get into the software and see the details. Because quite frankly, I think that it's their job to look at this stuff. They should go in and get the reports. I've seen before where I've heard stories of, I have to pull all of these reports and customize them all and save them as a PDF and either email or print or fax to my CPA firm. And that's a lot of time on you or someone you hired's plate when you have all sorts of other stuff going on, like running your business and creating amazing projects and all the administrative things that you have to deal with as a business owner. Anyway, I think that it's important that a CPA firm should have the ability to go in and get the reports themselves. And who knows, the person working on your account will be able to kind of go in and see the details and hopefully get a better understanding of how Design Manager works and how projects work and that kind of stuff. Also, the last thing that I want to say about this, I'm just trying to remember if I had this before. The last thing I want to give you advice for is if you haven't talked to your tax preparer yet, you might want to call them and ask them for the ability to come in and talk to someone and do a fall projection, especially if your business is such that you're growing a great deal from the previous year. You want to make sure that there's no tax surprises, and so most CPA firms have that ability. They're open all year round, and they should have the ability to meet with you at some point, get to know more about what's changing in the business, and be able to kind of do a projection as if it was the end of the year to give you tax planning advice so you don't have any big surprises. How often do you typically meet with your clients? So if you have a current tax preparer who says they don't meet at all, or we'll send you a packet in the beginning of tax season, you can accumulate it and bring us the stuff, and we'll talk to you when our tax return's done. That's how much value are you getting out of that? How do you charge? That goes with the bookkeeper as well, but a CPA, that's important too. How are they going to invoice it? Are they going to give you a flat rate for how much it costs to file the tax return? Or do they say, we're not really sure and it's by the hour? Obviously, if you can get a flat rate, then you'll be able to budget future cash flows better. You'll know how much it's going to cost versus kind of wondering, well, I don't know how long it's going to take, and now you are really not sure how much the bill is going to be. So, I think most CPA firms at this point can give you at least a good estimate or a fixed price, and that's great because then you can budget, like I said. Remember, you are in charge. You are the one paying the bill. If you don't feel comfortable, ask questions and make sure you get an answer that helps you understand. So that's so important. Like, I know sometimes it can, if it's not something that you're that you feel like you're have complete understanding, it might be hard to what if I ask the wrong question, or I asked the wrong question, whatever. You got to ask questions, and you got to feel comfortable with the people that you're working with, because this stuff is very important. Okay, so what if you don't like the answers so you're asking these questions. Now, what if you don't like the answers? You're going to keep interviewing potential clients until you feel comfortable with the individual you pick. Have the courage to find the perfect teammate. The right accountant will answer your questions with patience and clarity. They're going to be willing to communicate at least twice a year, and they're going to have a clear answer on how they bill. If they say it depends, yeah, we just talked about that. But this is really important, having the courage to find the perfect teammate. I'm not saying to fire your whole team and then be like, okay, in a month from now, I'm going to start looking for someone. But if you're listening to all this and you're getting butterflies in your stomach and your gut, and you're like, oh, I kind of can tell that the bookkeeper or the tax preparer that I'm working with isn't the right fit, it's okay to contact other people and ask questions if they're accepting new clients, to get that feeling. Because, again, taking the time to communicate and getting answers so that you can understand this stuff is so important. So those are just some of the things that you'll find in what I believe is the right accountant. It's also so important to set up a schedule to review specific reports. You and your bookkeeper should set up a recurring schedule to review your financial reports. So whether that's on a weekly basis, a couple of times a month, a monthly basis. We had talked about those specific reports, those detailed reports that you could ask a potential bookkeeper whether or not they go over. If you do have a bookkeeper and they do a good job, but the communication isn't there, trying to get on a recurring schedule is great. And as a business owner, setting up and blocking time to do this is so important. So I own a business, and I am not going to tell you that I am perfect at blocking time. I try, and then I block times for certain things, and then I realize I've passed that time during the week and I didn't do what I was supposed to. But having that on your calendar, where if your bookkeeper comes into the office every Friday and they come from 9 to 11 and you're gonna be there and you're gonna be ready to go over those reports from 9 to 10, and that's on your calendar, and you get into the habit of doing that, it'll just make it easier, and you'll know, and it's gonna give you more clarity as to the financial details of your business, and you're gonna have a better idea of what's going on. Making an agenda listing exactly which reports should be reviewed and what the outcomes will be afterwards, that's something that can give you more value. You still have to deal with your numbers. If your bookkeeper is simply emailing you reports, you're missing on a golden opportunity. Again, communication isn't so important. Everyone on the team working together and reviewing these details will give you it'll just make everyone's lives a lot easier. Okay, let's see. Let's go over some final takeaways. So, do not be afraid to ask questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question. And if you ask questions and the people that you hire that are on your team make you feel stupid, then you know what to do. You can go find someone who won't make you feel stupid. It's ridiculous that you would be paying for someone where you're afraid to ask a question. Okay, at a minimum, so you might say, oh, I really trust my bookkeeper, and I can't meet weekly. This guy's crazy. I'm so busy, I can't meet weekly with someone. At a minimum, you, as the business owner, should be reviewing your actual bank and credit card statements for fraudulent charges. So in this day and age, with the amount of fraud that's happening, it is so important for the business owner to look at the actual statements, not the reports the bookkeeper sends you, the actual statements. Because you never know when something might hit your account by accident. Maybe it's a legitimate charge, maybe it's fraud. For example, someone gets your credit card and they buy something at Pottery Barn for themselves. It could happen, and your bookkeeper could see Pottery Barn on the credit card statement and think that, you bought it for a project. That's so easy. Throw it in cost of goods sold. But if that's a fraudulent charge, there might be other fraudulent charge. Sometimes with these credit cards, like it starts at low amounts and then it gets higher. You, as the business owner, should be reviewing those actual statements on a monthly basis. So finding the time to do that is so important. No matter how much you trust your accountant, you have an obligation to review certain financial information for your business. You are an entrepreneur, and you cannot achieve your goals if you ignore your finances. Say that all the time. Your bookkeeper and CPA need to be in communication periodically so that everyone is giving you the maximum value for your business finances. So I think out of all of this information, the most important word to take away from this whole presentation is communication. It's so important, and without it, all of it, I believe doesn't really matter. Okay, so I was going to show you this. Lindsay was nice enough to talk about it earlier in the presentation. I am working on doing different online classes. I'm calling it the Designer CPA School. So you can go on my website, thedesignercpa.com. There is a button for this, or you can do /classes for designers and just check it out. I have a couple of different classes right now that are available. I'm also working on some different levels of tax classes to give you, as business owners, more information so that you know what you should be looking at and what's deductible, maybe what's not deductible, and there's going to be different stuff, and I'm hoping to have that done by market, fall market. That's a goal I have, so I'm going to keep doing that. So I invite you to check it out. I have a free guide on my site that you can do as well, and that is also, if you have any questions, that is my email address. And Lindsay, I'm done, but if there was any questions or comments that anyone put in, I'd be happy to answer them.
Well, it looks like you've done an excellent job today, Peter, because I don't think we have any questions to go over. There are a few that I usually get from a lot of different people along the way, so we can start. I just have a couple, if you don't mind, Peter.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, and then actually one just came in too. What specific reports should you be reviewing with your bookkeeper? Actually, that's a good question, and we have a whole nother webinar on that.
Yeah, so the main reports that they're going to talk about is the balance sheet and the profit and loss statement. the income statement. But I would also go over, and I would look at it at the same time, the AR aging report, the accounts receivable aging report with the open client deposit report, making sure that that's accurate. So the open client deposit report will show you, like if any retainers or proposal amounts came in. AR aging is anything you've invoiced to your clients that haven't been paid. You want to make sure that those are accurate. And if a client hasn't paid you, why, that kind of thing, you can kind of figure that out. And then on the other side, you can look at the open vendor deposits, make sure that's accurate and there isn't anything still on there, still in the form of a purchase order that hasn't been invoiced from the vendor yet. And then if your bookkeeper will helps you file sales tax, you could always review that sales tax report for a customized amount of time to make sure that the amount that the report says to pay sales tax is accurate.
Okay, great. If there's anybody else that wants to get a question in, please feel free to type it in now. I think you kind of touched on this, but something that I get quite frequently is the QuickBooks, previous history of QuickBooks and wanting to stick with QuickBooks instead of Design Manager because that's what the bookkeeper is familiar with. A lot of the times that comes down to familiarity and they just don't want to learn a new product. But is there anything else that you recommend, like saying to them? From my point of view, we have a webinar that is dedicated to bookkeepers, accountants, that's 30 minutes long and just shows you exactly where to go in Design Manager to get to those reports that you were just talking about, the key areas. So I always recommend that. But I mean, it should come from
QuickBooks
you.
QuickBooks is never going to give you as the business owner or the bookkeeper the detailed reports that are so important to the project like Design Manager is going to. It's just not going to happen. Does it sometimes take longer for the bookkeeper to work on a monthly basis in Design Manager versus QuickBooks? Yeah, but that's because maybe they are just starting and it's taking them longer, and they're just they're just trying to learn it. But the value of being able to have that detailed reporting in a system like Design Manager and having it at your fingertips and being able to kind of review it whenever you want is, I think it's really valuable. So.
Okay, great. Anything else? I don't see any other questions here. So I think we're pretty good. Again, we'll be down at High Point this year. So if anybody's going to be around, we'll be located in the Designers Lounge at Universal Showroom. So please come check us out. It's gorgeous. And we'll be sending email information about that regularly starting probably next week about all that fun events and things where you can actually see us in person. So anything else, Peter? Your classes look great.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to being down there and hanging out with you guys and meeting everyone who hopefully who are on the webinar. So
great. All right, everybody. Happy Thursday. Have a great rest of your day. And this will be put up onto our YouTube page and shout out as an email too. So talk to you on the next one.
Awesome. Have a good day, everyone.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.